Good morning, everybody. Good morning to Instagram, to Facebook, to all the people out there. This is the PT on Ice Daily Show, and my name is Morgan Denny. I teach the primary care physical therapy course and also the management of the post-COVID patient. So today, I really want to share with you a good story. Now, I know it's, sometimes these are didactic, oftentimes these are theoretical, but this is a real patient case. And I think sometimes it's important that we dial it back and don't just talk about our successes or our failures, but kind of talk about those middle of the road patients, the one where we're kind of not necessarily like waving our flags, we've succeeded, we've done everything, but the ones where we're kind of just chugging along. And this is someone who's taught me quite a lot about being a PT. So I have a current patient. We're going to call him David, but he's a 69-year-old male. I started seeing him probably around 2018, and he came to me because he was having severe knee pain from a fall into the tub. He had a PT previously at another clinic, but they had recently shut down, and so he was looking for a new physical therapist. He'd been with his old PT for like 10 years. And that person had decided to retire when the clinic had shut, so he came to see me. He had a history of back pain, knee pain, neck pain. You just pick a body part, he kind of had been through the ringer in terms of the medical system. So he came in a wheelchair, pretty much couldn't walk, sedentary at home, couldn't get out of bed, wasn't able to take care of himself very much. He's one of those people who had a medical list a mile long, the kind where during your eval, you're looking through your background history of medical stuff and you're thinking, okay, and this, and this, and this, and when providing me with his pharmaceuticals list, it was one of those where I was like, gonna have to look this up, and it spanned the full 8.5 by 11 inch sheet. One of those patients, right? I remember even at first he was on, looking at the sheet, he was on multiple opiates, even morphine, some weird blood pressure medications that aren't necessarily as common anymore, and even some neurologic drugs that I had to look into, one of which turned out to be a seizure med. So he's one of those patients, right, who's got tons of stuff in the background, lots of comorbidities, but also has this truly orthopedic physical therapy need. But the biggest thing about this individual, is that he really had a lot of fear. Like over the years of being in the medical system, one of the biggest takeaways had been that if something hurts, it's probably doing damage and you shouldn't do it. And what I came to find is that was a very ingrained belief in David's mentality. So that was a big piece. Now, I've been seeing him for years, and I know a lot of PTs would look down on that and say, boo-hoo, you shouldn't treat a patient for years and years. You've got to discharge them in 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. But this is a patient that has taken so much work and time to change not only his physical body, but the psychology behind it, and to really work on all the underlying components. Now, from a PT standpoint, we do everything. We do resistance training. We've worked on balance quite a bit, agility, motor control coordination, vestibular system. Pick a thing that PTs can work on with people in the clinic. We've probably done some of it. And honestly, he's come a very, very long way. It has made all the difference. I've talked to most of his doctors on the phone. I've sent him for cardiology checkups, for abdominal ultrasounds because he had some underlying liver stuff that we had to figure out. I've sent him to see a neurologist because he was presenting with some really weird underlying neural components, where he actually, one of the most concerning besides balance elements, was he would literally find himself forward flexing slowly and be completely unaware of it until I would say, David, why are you facing the ground? Why aren't you standing up tall? And he would say, oh, I don't know. And then he would stand up. But he said he would literally find himself there for 30 minutes at a time at home and not have any idea how long had elapsed. He would also sort of lose his balance out of the blue. And so I sent him for a neurology consult. The neurologist said, you don't have any underlying, nervous system thing that I'm aware of or that's presenting strongly enough yet to diagnose. But one of the things he did do that I couldn't do was went through his medication list and he got rid of some of the things that David didn't need anymore. So for example, that seizure med that David had been prescribed 10 or 15 years ago because he had had one seizure, that neurologist discharged. And wouldn't you know it, that after over the years or over the months after that medication was gotten rid of, David's balance got better. He stopped going into forward flexion. And looking it up, that drug actually turned out to be one that can be degenerative towards the nervous system, taken over a long period of time, and can affect all sorts of different balance systems. So that was an awesome thing to be able to be like, yes, we solved that one. I mean, I didn't solve it, but at least I got him to someone who could. So that was a total win. Now, at this point in time, or at least I should say pre-COVID, things we're doing in the clinic would be like, David does deadlifts, he does push-ups on his countertop at home, which is a major win. He does squats with a kettlebell. We've even gotten the agility ladder out. And while I wouldn't say that he's jumping, he's definitely moving side to side and not tripping and falling. His balance has improved significantly. Like, he's doing all the things. On the health management side, we're working on taking vitals every time. I've gotten David really good at not only taking his blood pressure at home, but also being able to understand what it means. And over time, even though he's on a lot of blood pressure meds, our ability to take blood pressure in the clinic and then see what happens with exercise has really shifted a lot of his medication. Because as you would assume, as he's gotten healthier and more fit, some of his cardiac meds were overprescribed. So he was actually becoming hypotensive, feeling tired, fatigued, like he couldn't deal with exercise as well. It's because his blood pressure was regulating his heart rate too low. Okay, good. We never would have known that was the case if we weren't taking vitals. So that has helped for his prescribers to kind of have that information. We've worked on blood sugar stuff, making sure he's consistent at taking it and understanding what it means. And we've gone from him eating 4 pieces of toast with coffee for breakfast because the toast makes the coffee taste better to now at least having 1 piece of toast just for that flavor and having a couple eggs and some vegetables. We worked on a lot of lifestyle modification stuff. We work on David being able to get up and move more frequently throughout the day and not be sedentary in one spot over a long period of time because he has a lot of circulatory issues where he's developed neuropathy in his feet, where he has hemosiderin staining, which is basically like a venous insufficiency that then shows up as kind of like brown splotchiness on the lower legs. So he needs to be moving more frequently to get that muscular pumping to recirculate his blood more effectively because his vascular system can't do it passively anymore. So he understands all that stuff. And one of the big things I think that has changed for him is he actually now has some joy. So when David first started coming in, again, had been wheelchair bound for years, had not really been able to take care of himself, spent most of the day in bed, and would come in and occasionally, once he trusted me, just be like, I'm just kind of depressed this week. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I alive, basically? Now, over the years, as he's gained less fear and really gotten more confident that his body wasn't working against him, he's been able to get into photography and go back to painting, and actually is a really amazing painter when I can convince him to let me see his stuff. It's pretty off the charts. And he's begun to have like things and reasons to live for. He can go out to his shop and do some work. One of the things he loves to do is to go and work on like building Halloween elements, which I think is so rad. So it's like he finally has stuff in his life where he's been able to kind of get there functionally, like have a reason to live, do things that he was afraid to do before because he thought he was going to hurt himself. So even though he's in pain, now at least he's functioning, he's living, he's being a human in society. And while I usually kind of forget where we started, it's good to kind of look back sometimes and remind ourselves like, okay, he used to be in a wheelchair, unable to walk, unable to take care of himself. Now he's like painting, he's using his elliptical. After 2 years, I finally got him to take the clothes hanging off his old Bowflex and start using it as something besides a clothes hanger. It's like we've made a lot of progress. We've gained a lot of ground. And it's been awesome to see this person who I would consider somewhat ruined by the medical system and procedures and pharmaceuticals, et cetera, to see him kind of come back to life. Now, over the years, as many of our patients who are in chronic pain end up doing, David has gone to a pain clinic because they are the ones who do injections and prescribe drugs and all the things that as PTs we kind of boo-hoo and hate on. And honestly, I don't love this pain clinic either. Because over the years, for David at least, he has had more than 10 RFAs, so radio frequency ablations, where they go in and they splice the little spinal nerves. And, you know, while it worked the first couple times, it literally took the last 3 not working before I could really convince David he didn't need any more RFAs. They weren't helping, even though the doctor was prescribing them. He's had multiple injections. And again, it took a while of us talking about it for him to get smart and wise to the fact that even though the doctor prescribed them, he actually wasn't getting anything from them. In fact, usually when he goes in for one of these injections, he ends up in more pain, not in less pain, but in more pain. So they're not actually helping. They're always setting him back. So why does he keep going back to this place, right? This is the question that we're like, why would any human do that? He goes back because they also are the controller of his opiates, right? So when you're someone who's been on different forms of opioids for decades, you have to go to a special person, a pain clinic, a specific doctor in order to get your opiate prescription. And for David, that's this pain clinic doctor. It's not his primary care physician. It's not any other specialist. It's not a neurologist. It's the pain doctor. So over the years, basically David's been, I'm not going to say forced, but kind of cajoled into having all these procedures because the person that prescribes his opiates is also the person prescribing these procedures. Now, recently, said doctor basically told David he needed to get a spinal cord stimulator because they were going to decrease his opiates. And while I think many of you are going to think, Morgan, that's crazy. You know, opiates are bad. Like, of course we want to get rid of the opiates. And while on paper, I would 100% agree with that statement, in specific cases like this, I think it's important that we remember that like our patients have been on these drugs, addicted to these drugs for years, like for David, over a decade. And so just getting rid of them or forcing procedures on them that aren't necessarily going to help or do anything, because this guy, I mean, the last thing he needs is yet another procedure. None of them have worked. Why would you do this? And someone who's functional, right? So for this doctor or for this patient example, David and I basically made a plan. We were like, okay, what we're going to do is we're both going to talk to said doctor. We're going to try to encourage him to just give us some time because we've been out of in-person PT over the last year due to COVID. But now that we've both been vaccinated, I feel it's a good, safe element or environment for David to be in. So he's back in the clinic. We're rebuilding some strength. But as you'd understand, he's lost some ground. He has some increased pain. He's not as strong as he used to be. So we're kind of like working uphill again. But basically, we've both talked to this doctor. And the idea, the goal is to basically have a timeline where we can work in PT, gain some physical reserve, and then begin to slowly taper some opiates. That is the goal. But over talking about this and while discussing the case, David said something to me that I thought was really powerful, and I wanted to share that. He said, Morgan, do you think my doctor actually understands my pain? Like, do you think he knows what it feels like to be in pain the way I am all the time? Like, when a patient says something like that to you, that's got to floor you a little bit, right? Because honestly, I don't know either. And David, no, I don't think your doctor has a clue. Your pain doctor is around 40, like I am. He probably has a really high level of health education. He's probably got 0 comorbidities, and he probably hasn't had 10 to 15 surgeries where they replace everything or splice nerves. He doesn't have neuropathies. He doesn't have all of the comorbidities that add to a chronic state of inflammation where your nervous system can never get away. So no, David, no, I don't think that your doctor understands your pain. But I think even though PTs don't hold the prescribing power that that general medical doctors do, and I am so thankful for that. At the same time, it's an important question for us to ask ourselves too, because we're working with people in all sorts of different pain patterns. And oftentimes, I think we make more assumptions than we understand. And I think this is a good question for us. You know, it's not like I hope that we all end up in chronic pain or with all these comorbidities for whatever reason, just so that we can relate to our patients at this level. Not at all. But I think it's important for us to step it back, like not necessarily to be trash talking opiates in front of our patients who've been on them for a long time, whose basic life has become more functional with some of these drugs on board. I'm not going to say because of them, but with them on board, because those people have maybe become functional, are like living a better life. And as PTs, I think it's our job to not just make it about taking a side, like saying, I'm against opiates, so you shouldn't be on them, but to really think about the patient, to be an advocate for our patients, to advocate for them to be functional and happy and healthy and strong, and not necessarily just go by whatever the cookbook says the recipe should have. So it's important for us to kind of keep this stuff in mind. Now, to fill in the gaps, basically, for David, what we managed to do was both talk to his doctor and say, hey, you know, like we need to build up this reserve and we've got 3 months. And I think that that's actually an even better compromise than keeping things the same way. Because if you think about it, for David, if he knows he has 3 months to build up a lot of physical reserve and then we'll start tapering one of his opioid drugs, that's good. That's motivation. It's impetus for us to really work hard and for him to do a lot of stuff independently. And at least then we're working on all fronts medically. Also, when talking to his doctor, I'll tell you quite honestly, I told his doctor that he asked me this question about if he could feel his pain. And there was a long pause. And I think that's really important. So I think when we're advocating for patients, we've got to remember that doctors are people too, even though that may seem strange. And so we can talk to them, you know, and really be able to express what it is our patients are feeling and where they're at functionally, because doctors don't see that. You know, and for patients who can't communicate appropriately about where they're at or what they need, it can be really difficult for them. So from a PT perspective, to be able to call and say, hey, this is where the patient is at, this is what they're functionally able to do, and they are really fearful about this decrease in opiates, and they also feel really pressured to do all these other surgeries and procedures that you keep suggesting and pushing on them, and they just have all these concerns. Can we do PT first? Can we do some other types of treatment first? And then with the long-term goal be to decrease their opiates. Like the doctor was so open to that and so amenable, but the patient didn't get that sense. So it's good for us to be able to like kind of call and bridge that gap. Now, if you are seeing patients like David that have heaps of comorbidities and a lot of medical stuff going on that you feel like is really interfering with your treatment, jump into the primary care PT course. I believe the next cohort starts in June, and we do a fairly good job, of course, I would say, of covering all the bases in terms of background medical stuff and figuring out what it is we as PTs can do, not only to refer patients to the right place when necessary, but also to be able to, you know, work on testing and measures and what it is we can educate our patients on to change in relationship to those. So feel free to jump into that. But otherwise, I hope you all have a great day, and let's keep in mind that we don't necessarily know how our patients feel, and we need to respect that. Okay, everyone, have a good day. The song of the day is Something You Do by Leanne LaHavas. So enjoy. Peace out, everyone.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.